The clock read 2:48 when the first anomaly appeared. Not an explosion, not a weapons alarm. Silence. 6 discrete pockets of acoustic absence arranged in a geometric pattern that no natural phenomenon could produce, spread across a 40-mile arc southeast of the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group in the Gulf of Oman. A junior sonar operator aboard USS Spruance stared at his waterfall display for 4 seconds before he understood what he was looking at. Not one submarine, 6. Iran had never attempted this before, not in 3 decades of wargaming, not in any exercise the U.S. intelligence community had ever observed or intercepted. 6 Project 877 Kilo-class submarines, every operational heavy displacement hull in the Iranian Navy, deployed simultaneously in a coordinated encirclement geometry designed to collapse the Abraham Lincoln's defensive perimeter from multiple bearings at once. The tactical logic was brutal in its simplicity. A carrier strike group's anti-submarine warfare screen is built around the assumption that threats come from a limited number of vectors. Saturate enough vectors simultaneously, and the mathematics of response time begin to work against the defender. Somewhere in Tehran's naval command, someone had decided that this was the moment to spend everything they had built over 30 years. It was a decision made from desperation dressed as strategy, and it would cost Iran everything. The Abraham Lincoln is not a ship that panics. CVN-72, a Nimitz-class nuclear carrier displacing over 100,000 tons at full load, carrying nearly 5,000 personnel and the full combat power of Carrier Air Wing 9, FA-18E and FA-18F Super Hornets, F-35C Lightning IIs, EA-18G Growlers, and E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes, had been operating in Fifth Fleet waters for weeks as diplomatic relations with Tehran deteriorated past the point of recovery. She had not arrived unprepared. Neither had the submarines surrounding her. What Tehran's planners understood, and what made this moment genuinely dangerous, is that the Kilo-class is not a trivial weapons system. The Russians nicknamed them black hole submarines. Anechoic rubber tiles across the exterior hull absorb active sonar returns and suppress outgoing acoustic signatures to the point where distinguishing one from ambient ocean noise requires sustained multi-sensor attention. 6 of them, coordinated, exploiting thermal layers and the acoustic interference of heavy commercial shipping traffic, positioned across 6 different bearings. This was the most sophisticated undersea threat the U.S. Navy had faced in the Arabian Sea in a generation. In theory, it was close to the perfect storm. In practice, it ran directly into a force that had been preparing for exactly this scenario for years. But the U.S. Navy had not been idle. 3 days prior, P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft operating from Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE had been seeding sonobuoy patterns across every probable transit corridor in the Gulf of Oman. The operation was not reactive, it was anticipatory. Signals intelligence drawn from Iranian naval communications had flagged unusual activity at Bandar Abbas submarine base 2 weeks earlier. Fleet analysts had assessed the probability of a multi-boat deployment and built tracking frameworks for each hull. When the Poseidons began picking up snorkel masts and propulsion signatures across 6 separate contact points over a 72-hour window, the picture resolved with cold clarity. Tehran was not posturing, they were executing. At 2:51, 3 minutes after the first anomaly, the Abraham Lincoln's tactical action officer received a classified contact summary that confirmed what Spruance's sonar operators had already suspected. 6 submarines, bearings 112, 138, 164, 196, 221, and 247, ranges between 11 and 18 nautical miles, all running on electric drive, all moving to establish firing solutions on the carrier's projected course. The encirclement geometry was nearly complete. Nearly. The TAO issued a single order: Every Romeo on the flight deck launches now. Helicopter Maritime Strike Squadron 71 put 6 MH-60R Seahawks airborne in 11 minutes. 2 additional Romeos from the escort destroyers USS Higgins and USS Paul Hamilton added to the response. 8 helicopters total, spreading across the threat bearings in coordinated pairs, flying nap of wave, maintaining radio silence, each crew understanding that they were not responding to one contact. They were managing a battlefield that covered 40 miles of open ocean simultaneously. The MH-60R carries the AQS-22 Advanced Airborne Low-Frequency Sonar, a dipping system that lowers a transducer into the water and listens with discrimination sophisticated enough to classify submarine types, separate machinery signatures, and reject false targets in cluttered acoustic environments. Against a Kilo running electric drive, it requires patience and positioning. Against 6 kilos spread across multiple bearings, it requires something harder: simultaneous coordination across 8 aircraft without breaking radio silence, sharing acoustic data through encrypted burst transmissions, building a composite picture of a battlefield that no single crew could see entirely. The Romeo crews had trained for this, not as a theoretical exercise, as a specific contingency, war-gamed repeatedly against Kilo-class acoustic profiles, rehearsed until the response became instinct rather than procedure. By 0318, all 6 submarines had been localized to position uncertainties of less than 800 meters. The Iranian crews had no idea. They were running silent, confident in their acoustic discipline, certain that their geometry was working. What they could not know was that the acoustic environment around them had been shaped by 8 Romeo sonar systems operating in overlapping patterns, contaminating the precise frequency bands their own passive sonar relied on. They were hunting blind inside a sensor environment that had been constructed specifically to blind them. At 0331, Tehran apparently issued the attack order. Whether it came by burst transmission or had been pre-programmed as a time-on-target trigger, all 6 submarines began flooding torpedo tubes within a 90-second window. The fire transients arrived on Romeo acoustic records almost simultaneously across 6 different bearing lines. 12 Valfage heavyweight torpedoes, Iranian-produced, 533mm diameter, active and passive acoustic homing, entered the water in the span of 80 seconds. The targeting solutions had all been computed against the Abraham Lincoln's low-frequency acoustic signature, a 100,000-ton nuclear carrier generating a distinctive signature audible across considerable distance. What happened next unfolded across 6 simultaneous engagements in the space of 4 minutes, and the outcomes were not uniform. Weapons-free authorization for carrier self-defense had been pre-delegated before the Romeos ever left the flight deck. Romeo 1 and Romeo 2, working the highest threat bearing at 138 degrees and range 11 nautical miles, dropped Mk-54 lightweight torpedoes within 40 seconds of the fire transients from Submarine Alpha, the closest and most dangerous contact. The Mk-54 is propelled past 40 knots by an electric motor fed from a seawater-activated silver oxide battery, guided by acoustic homing logic capable of navigating thermal layers and rejecting decoys. Against a 74-meter hull running at 4 knots at 90 meters depth, it was not solving a difficult equation. 2 weapons, offset by 700 meters, the Iranian captain attempted emergency blow and hard turn. The first Mk-54 detonated under the keel at frame 31. The pressure hull fractured along its full length. Submarine Alpha and its crew of 52 did not survive. Submarine Bravo, bearing 112 at 14 nautical miles, had positioned itself shallower than the others, approximately 55 meters, apparently attempting to use the thermal layer above it as acoustic cover for its torpedo run. That decision became its partial salvation and its catastrophe simultaneously. Romeo 3 dropped a single Mk-54 that detonated not under the keel, but close. Proximity detonation 18 meters off the starboard bow as the Iranian captain executed a desperate emergency ascent. The blast pressure wave shattered the forward torpedo room bulkhead, flooded 2 ballast tanks, destroyed both bow-mounted sonar arrays, and drove the submarine upward through the thermal layer in an uncontrolled emergency blow. Submarine Bravo broke the surface 200 meters from its intended depth, listing 22 degrees to port. Forward hull section visibly buckled, unable to dive. It was mission killed. Whether its crew survived the surface emergence in any condition to be recovered remained an open question. What was not open was whether Submarine Bravo posed any further threat to the Abraham Lincoln. It did not. The remaining 4 submarines, Charlie through Foxtrot, faced a response they had no doctrine to counter. With Submarine Alpha destroyed and Submarine Bravo mission killed in the first 4 minutes, the Romeo pairs covering the remaining bearing lines had already established dip positions and resolved firing solutions before the Iranian captains understood that their coordinated assault had begun to unravel. The Valfage torpedoes from all 6 submarines were running toward the Abraham Lincoln on their terminal homing patterns, but the acoustic environment between launch points and carrier had been saturated by 8 Romeo sonar systems operating across overlapping frequencies. The Iranian weapons could not discriminate the carrier from background noise. Not one acquired a target. All 12 ran their fuel out and sank to the seafloor. 12 weapons, representing years of Iranian domestic torpedo development and tens of millions of dollars in production investment, accomplished nothing beyond confirming the limits of their own guidance architecture. Submarines Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot received Mk-54 engagements within a 6-minute window. All 4 were destroyed. 4 more crews. The mathematics of the engagement, stripped of sentiment, are these. Iran committed its entire operational Kilo-class submarine force, 6 hulls, an estimated 312 trained submariners, representing 30 years of investment in undersea warfare capability, to a single coordinated strike. 1 submarine was destroyed outright in the opening seconds. 1 was driven to the surface, severely damaged and combat ineffective. 4 were destroyed in follow-on engagements. The Valfage torpedoes they fired collectively accomplished nothing. The Abraham Lincoln continued northeast at 18 knots throughout the entire engagement. Her course did not change. Her speed did not change. Her flight deck was cycling aircraft for scheduled operations before the last Iranian submarine was destroyed. The carrier's commanding officer was informed of the engagement's conclusion via a brief status report delivered to the bridge at 0409. He acknowledged it and returned his attention to flight deck operations. The strategic consequences extend far beyond the loss of hardware. Iran's submarine force no longer exists as a functional component of its naval order of battle. The tactical doctrine Tehran spent 30 years refining, the coordinated multi-boat encirclement designed to overwhelm carrier ASW screens through simultaneous saturation, was tested at full commitment against the exact force it was designed to defeat, and it failed at every level simultaneously. The detection failed, the positioning failed, the weapons failed, the timing failed. More significantly, none of these failures were the result of luck or favorable conditions. Each one was the product of a detection and response architecture that had been tracking Iranian submarines from the moment they left Bandar Abbas, that had pre-positioned assets to shape the acoustic environment against them weeks in advance, and that had pre-delegated weapons authority to ensure response time would be measured in seconds rather than in the minutes that authorization chains normally consume. Iran's strategy assumed gaps. There were none. The cost ledger is precise and worth examining without emotion. Iran expended its entire operational heavy submarine fleet, an estimated 260 to 312 trained submariners across 6 crews and 12 Val-Fajr torpedoes at approximately $1.8 million each. None of it can be quickly replaced. Russia is not selling kilos to Iran under current sanctions conditions. Iran's domestic submarine industrial base cannot produce displacement hulls of comparable capability. The trained crews represent years of specialized development: sonar operators, weapons officers, engineering technicians whose expertise cannot be reconstituted on any near-term timeline. A submarine force is not simply steel and torpedoes. It is accumulated institutional knowledge, and that knowledge went to the bottom of the Gulf of Oman on a Tuesday morning before sunrise. The United States Navy expended approximately 10 Mk-54 torpedoes and the aviation fuel for 8 Romeo sorties across a 4-hour operation. Total direct cost under $10 million. The return on that expenditure was the permanent elimination of the primary asymmetric undersea threat Iran had positioned against American carrier operations in the Gulf region for a generation. Beyond the immediate tactical result, the engagement produced something equally valuable: a comprehensive data set on Iranian submarine coordination protocols, acoustic signatures across all 6 hull variants, torpedo performance characteristics under operational conditions, and crew decision-making patterns under terminal pressure. That data will inform American ASW planning for the next decade. The Gulf of Oman is not a sanctuary. It never was, and after this morning, it will not be treated as one by any naval planner in Tehran who survives to write the after-action assessment. Iran built its submarine strategy around the premise that acoustic complexity, thermal layering, and coordinated saturation could neutralize American carrier power in the choke environments of the Persian Gulf and its approaches. What the engagement confirmed in under 90 minutes is that acoustic complexity is a condition both sides operate inside simultaneously, and that the side which has mapped that environment in advance, shaped it deliberately, and pre-positioned its responses within it does not experience complexity as a constraint. It experiences complexity as a weapon. Iran came to the Gulf of Oman with everything it had built over 30 years: every hull, every trained crew, every torpedo. What it found was a battlefield that had been constructed around it before it arrived, by a force that had been reading its movements, anticipating its doctrine, preloading its response architecture, and waiting with remarkable patience for exactly this moment to arrive. The Romeos returned to the Lincoln's flight deck before 0430, refueled and ready to cycle again in under 40 minutes. Somewhere beneath the dark water of the Gulf of Oman, resting on the seafloor at depths that no recovery operation will ever reach, lies what Iran's naval command spent 30 decades building, what Tehran's leadership spent years threatening to unleash, and what a generation of Iranian submariners gave their lives believing could change the balance of power in these waters. They came looking for a carrier. The carrier never changed course.